Whew, I'm back again. I don't know if anyone stayed with me or not. I don't know what that was all about. I had to reboot. So I'm just going to sit here a minute and see if I can get everyone back again. Let's see. See if anybody refreshes. I'm not sure if it'll let you know, so let me type in again. Oh, Gloria, I got someone back. Hey, Gloria. I lost my internet. The computer didn't. I had to reboot it. Didn't want to reboot. I don't know what that was all about. But I'm going to wait a few minutes to see if anybody else makes it back. See if anybody finds us. Thanks for hanging in there, Gloria. Let's see. We got Gloria. Oh, Cindy, wasn't that the weirdest thing that happened? I haven't had any problem all day. I checked it, double checked it, triple checked it. I lost total internet connection. Haven't had that happen in a long time. And then had to reboot the computers, and it wouldn't pick up the cameras, and all that long story. So I'll wait a couple more minutes and see who comes back. That's too bad. I couldn't go to my other computer because it's not hooked up to all the cameras, I'm telling you. Cindy, just tell Lynn all she has to do is just keep refreshing. That's what I had to do, just keep refreshing the whole internet thing. I had to do it a couple times. And Christine was texting me that everything was fine. She just couldn't have a chat. And I kept telling her my computer wasn't on. And she could say that she could hear me. And I was kind of creeped out and thinking, oh my God, it can hear me? Oh, there you are. Let's just wait for Christine and Rhonda. Rhonda said she's on her way. I'll text Christine again, the poor thing. Oh, Rhonda's back. I just got Christine. I don't want to leave her behind. I hope you guys don't mind waiting. Oh, Christine, you made it! Yay! I gotta have a drink now. That was too much. Time for Moxie. Okay. Okay, I think we're all set now. Hopefully. Thank you. We lost, shoot, I forget her name now. She was on earlier with us. Okay. So, this week's video is brought to you by my little black book, where I have tips. And the tip of the day is, let's see, tip of the day. What shall we have? Tip of the day is tip number 4. Okay, I really do have things written in here. Tip number 4, press your fabrics before you cut. Use starch or starch alternative and make sure you press until it's dry. Press until it's dry. Turn it over to the other side and starch that, or what is it, Mary Ellen's? Best press. I mean, you don't have to glob it on like it's hairspray, but you always want to press until it's dry. Otherwise, the starch or the starch alternative, the whole point of it will be lost because it won't set in. So that is tip number 4 for today's class. Now I got to put that somewhere I don't lose it. Okay. So this was last week's block. I can set that aside. So today we're working on this block. I don't know why my light is not lighting it. Oh, here, do this. There we go. There we go. How's that? Only it's supposed to be this way. And if you're following along with your Gemini, it is on page 6, and it's called the Hourglass Block. And I'm doing a 6-inch block. So I need 8 2-inch squares and 4 3.5-inch squares. Seems like an odd set to go together, but it's gonna work. So let me set that like that. And I first need a 2-inch square. So my 2-inch square is the second one from the middle. So second one from the middle. I know, I have to put it away neatly. I can't help myself. Excuse me. And we need the 3.5. I want to make sure I've got the half square, a pencil, I don't need that. The half square triangle, not the quarter square triangle. So at the half square triangle, I want the 3.5. So last week I was on this side. Now I'm on this side. So the 3.5 is the middle one on this left side. So middle one, left side. And that's all we need for today. Okay, and let me just make sure there's no questions there. Okay, excuse me. So I did this one with green in the center and red on the outside. So this time I'm going to go red in the center and green on the outside. So I want to get my plates out. I seem to have a pencil. I'm not sure why I've got that. Oh. Okay, and I want to get my fabric. So I need background fabric, which is my white on white. I've got my red, and I've got my green. Oh. So I just need to look at my book, and let me just double check the chats to make sure I'm not missing something here. No, I think we're good. So if I look at my book, I can see that the little 2-inch squares are these little 4 patches that run through the middle. So the top left and bottom right. So I need 2 of my, what did I say I was doing? I'm doing my other one, red. So I need 2 red in this corner and 2 background. Sorry, I seem to be flustered here. So I need 8 squares. So that means I need 4 of my red and 4 of my white. And then on my half square triangles, I need 4. So I need 2 of my green and 2 of my white. I'm going to use my machine as a holder here. So I'm going to do the little squares first. So I need 4. I need 4 of my background. So I don't know, I'm going to fold this twice and see if it fits. Ooh, it does. See that? My back far enough. Okay, and then I need 4 of my red. So I should be able to, well, it's a different size fabric, but let's see if I can do that. Should make it because it's a 10-inch square. Plenty of room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one, I'm going to put the red on top of the white. And I didn't get my plates ready, which I should have done that first. So let me just do that. So this is my top plate. So my sandwich should be my clear plate that's the kind of crappy one. Not the best word to use. And then my metal plate, which I keep calling my tin plate. My metal plate. And this is what I want to cut into. So I'm going to, and I want to pick a new spot here. So I'm going to come down this way over here. And now I could do I could do my white first and then my red, but I'm gonna just since we got off to a late start, let me just see if we can get this done all at one time. And I just tape it. I have some hanging off this edge, and that's okay because when I feed the plates into the machine, this is just hanging out. It's not on any of the sides. So now I need my plastic shim and then my good plate. Well, better than the other ones. Turn my machine on. And let me get up to this one. And I want to make sure that I have it all nice and straight. Try to So that's done. I'm going to take my clear plate and I'm going to turn it over and set it down. I'm going to take my plastic shim and turn it over. Okay, now I'm down to my cut. Hopefully you can see it okay. I'm going to take my tape off. And I was just checking to make sure I didn't have any chats. Boy, my tape is extra sticky today. And I'm going to take my die off. Set it over there. Couldn't get that first piece of tape off. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 reds. My hands must be extra dry today. And then my whites, and I want to put them right side up so I can see the white on white sometimes is hard to see. Here we go. So I have my 4 2-inch squares, and I'm just going to trim this fabric while I have it right here. And just take off this little excess that I don't need. And see, this is still a pretty big piece of fabric left there. And I'm going to need my background again. So this time, and I want to make sure that I turn this one and I turn this one, put them back down again. And I only need 2. I only need 2 of my half square triangles of each color. Now, I have a fold here, and normally I would get up and iron that because it creased it when it went through. But we've already taken up a lot of time. So we got to remember now, the square didn't matter so much because it's the same on all sides, but we need to make sure that we're on the straight of grain. Okay, there we go. So my straight of grain is this way. So I want to make sure that I put this shorter end with the straight of grain. And remember, this angle is a bias, which means that's the most stretch you can have in a fabric is when you pull it on the bias. So we don't want to have a bias on our outside edge. We want the bias inside because we're immediately going to sew this gotta get over further. This half square triangle, we're going to sew it to the red half square triangle. So let me make sure I'm over far enough into this. There, that's better. So let me do that again, in case you couldn't see it. So to find the straight of grain, I'm gonna just kind of snap it. It has a higher pitch sound, but you notice the fabric doesn't really move. Not sure if you can see that. See? Now if I go this way, can you see the ripple in the fabric? Can you see that little ripple right there in the fabric? So, and I don't get that when I go this way. This has a higher sound to it when you snap it. This has a little bit lower sound. You get used to it after a while. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm going to be going this way on my short side of my half square triangle. Now I'm going to set that there so I know that it's right. And then I'm going to get my other fabric. And so I know the straight of grain is this way. So I'm going to fold this one in half. And now, I'm going to lay, okay, let me hold this aside. Now this fabric is bigger than the white, and I don't want to lose where the white is. So I'm going to put this fabric down first, and then put the white on top of it, and now put my half square triangle on. Does that make sense? If I had put the green on top, I wouldn't have been able to see where the white was, and I want to kind of keep an eye on where it is. So you can see easily right here that it's bigger. So if I put the green on top, I'm not aware of where that white is. So whatever fabric you have that's bigger, put that down underneath the smaller one. And I'm just going to give this a little tape in place. And now I'm going to finish my sandwich. And remember, I took this off already and turned it the right way, so I don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to put that on. And then my clear plastic on the top. And I'm going to try to reach this without getting my arm and shoulder in the way. That was a snappy one. Did you hear it? Okay, so my clear plate, this time I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to turn it over and turn it around. I can't remember now what I did last time. I'm going to turn it over and then around. And this is getting a little Bowie, but it's David Bowie. It's getting a little Bowie, but it's okay because it's not getting any worse as I go. So I'm going to just pull this off because I want to make sure I turn this one and turn it. And then I'm going to turn this one and turn it so that I'm ready next time. I'm all set to go when I cut another piece. I don't have to remember where I was last. That's how it works for me. The less I have to remember, the better I like it. Okay, so I've got my 2 whites and my 2 greens. And again, I want to trim up my fabrics. So I'm going to trim off these ends. And I'm going to keep this piece because that's a pretty good piece of fabric. And I'm going to keep this one because as we're going along, we're doing other blocks. You never know when you're going to be working with smaller ones. If I had this square, I could probably get that on there twice. So hang on to those. And then these, of course, are still good because we didn't even use this part of them. So we have those. Okay. So now we need to lay our block out so we know how to sew it. So we're going to look at our instructions. And we have a dark one up in the corner. If you see if I can line this up so you can see it all right. Let me push that back a little ways out of the way. There, can you see better there? So I know that these are going to go like in this little line. So I'm going to put, I got to make sure, because remember I folded everything up. And I know these green ones, if I look at my picture, are on the outside top corner and outside bottom corner. And so the white, or your background, whatever you're using for your background, will go there. So I've got my block laid out, but I just want to look at my picture and make sure that my picture and I are singing the same song together. So we're good. I'm going to set that aside. And now, today I think we'll work on the big ones first. So I'm going to take my corner, I'm going to fold it on top of the other corner. Let me bring my pin cushion around here. And remember, we're going to pin it before we pick it up, and we're pinning it on the side we're going to sew. Then I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to flip this one on top. So the background is on top of your focus fabric or your main fabric. And I'm going to pin it on the side I'm going to sew. My hands are very dry tonight. And I'm going to take it to the machine to sew. Now, the first thing I want to do is, let me see if I can get in close enough this time. So, sorry, keeps wanting to move on me. So the first thing I want to do is I have a pivot feature, so I'm going to put my pivot on. And I'm going to use my J foot. So I have a baby lock. This is an Aventura. So Aventura, and any of them above that, there's a few below it. And I think I keep saying that if your machine costs around $500 or so and up, you won't always have this pivot, but you're going to have the stitch that I'm going to use. Since I'm using my J foot, and I'm not using a single hole foot, which is if you're using the 1/4 inch foot with a guide, you're going to just stay on your straight middle stitch. But I'm using my J foot, so I'm going to arrow over until I see stitches that have a P. You see how they have the P? So this one with the P is for piecing. So this piecing stitch is straight in the center. You see how this piecing stitch, I keep trying to say paper piecing. Oh, you can't see it when I do that. Hold on. This stitch, you see how it runs a little bit to the right, and that's the one I want. Okay? And I'm going to leave it on. It switched it to 2.0 for stitch length because it knows I'm piecing. If I want to go to 2.5, I can, but I'm going to leave it at that. And then I'm going to come over here and I'll back up just a little bit. Okay? And I am going to, well, I shouldn't have done that first. Hold on. I'm going to bring my piece over to the machine. I got to hit my glasses up. I'm too close up. And I know that there's my pin. I'm going to be stitching on this side. So I'm going to just make sure that it's all lined up. And I'm going to stitch. Let me use my pin. I'm going to stitch right. You see this point? See that point right there? So I'm going to stitch just barely to the right of that. I mean, just barely. And that should give you your 1/4 inch seam. So, okay, I gotta change the angle a little bit because I can't see now. Okay, so I want to make sure that I have the fabric under the foot and just under the needle. And I'm lining up with this edge with my foot. And that doesn't mean my fabric is past the foot. It means it's even with the foot or just a tad to the left of the foot. If you're using your 1/4" foot with a guide, then you'll be running that edge along the guide. And just when I get near the end, oh, I forgot to put my pivot on. My pivot will come up. If it doesn't, I'll bring my foot up. I'm going to grab my other one, and I can stitch from this side or I can stitch from this side. It doesn't matter. But I want to make sure that I've got my needle so that I'm running along with my machine. And I'm going to line up my fabric with my foot. And when I get to the end, I'm just going to cut my thread. And see, now I have my 2 pieces. Let me back this up a little bit. So I'm going to find my scissors. I'm going to cut those. And what I want to do is I want to press my seam allowance to the dark side. So I'm going to have my dark fabric on top so that when I push this, and you can see the seam allowance. See it right there? So when I push that, that seam allowance is under that top fabric. Just give it a little finger press. Don't press too much. And you can use your wooden iron. And here's my other one. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Dark fabric is on the top. I'm just going to push that open. Finger press it. Okay? And then we're going to come back to the work table. And I'm going to make sure that I set those back down the same as my book tells me to. Or shows me. My book isn't telling me much of anything. So I just want to make sure that I've got my dark fabric in the top right-hand corner, bottom left-hand corner. So top right, bottom left. I just want to check everybody, make sure my very top left is a dark fabric, my very bottom left is a dark, and I've got this line going through. Okay, let me just check the chat and see if there's any new. We good? Everybody's good? Not chatting much tonight. You guys must be busy stitching. Okay, so now I've got to take it. So these fellas are done. Now I need to take care of this 4 patch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 patch. I got a 4 patch here and a 4 patch here. I'm only going to work with 1 4 patch at a time. Let's not get ahead of ourselves now. So 2 pins I'm going to need. So what I'm going to do, just like reading a book, I'm going to flip. So this is column 1. Oh, let me keep my finger. Let me do it this way. This is column 1. This is column 2. I'm going to take column 2, flip it over, same as if I was turning the page on a book, and I'm going to stick a pin in the side where I'm going to sew. I'm going to take the next row. I'm going to take column B, turn the page just like a book on top of column A, and I'm going to put a pin in it the way I'm going to sew. On the side I'm going to sew. Okay? Someone needs to chat, because I don't want to think my chat's broken or I'm frozen again. Sometimes I'm frozen and I don't know it. So I just keep going along. Okay, so now we're going to sew these. So back over here we go. I'm going to bring my 2 pieces over so you can see right where they are. Okay, and I can come in a little bit. I'm going to pick up the first one. I always pick it up so that my needle is facing towards my machine, the right side of my machine. Take the pin out. Make sure everybody's nice and lined up, because sometimes you can't line up well when you're pinning it when it's down on your mat. I want to make sure that I've got the fabric is just under the needle and it's under the foot. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch that one till I get to almost the end. I'm going to pick up the next one. Needle again is on my right. Okay, and I'm going to put it under the foot. I don't want to butt up right against the other fabric, but almost. I want to make sure I'm lined up with the edge of my foot. So here's my two pieces. Now this time, I'm not going to cut them apart. Let me back up a little bit. Oh. So that when I open them, they're in the order they're supposed to be. Let's go over to the work table again. Okay, so when I open these up, and they're still attached to each other, they should open up just the way they were set here. So the only thing I have to do now, is I want to make sure that, God, my fingers are just in your way everywhere here. I want to make sure that I am pressing my seam allowance to the dark side. So my top one is going to go to the left. My bottom one's going to go to the right. So I want to put my dark fabric on top. And then my hands are bigger than the piece of fabric. And then I'm going to push that fabric over just like we did before. Give it a little press so that my seam allowance is underneath that dark fabric. Then I'm going to do the same on this side, except this time I have to have it flip that way. So my dark fabric is on top. I'm just going to push my fabric, do a little finger press there, and we look like that. Oh, thanks, Rose. I sound good. That means I'm not frozen again. Frozen in time. Okay, so we good there so far? Now, we can go ahead and finish this one up, and then we'll go to this one. So what we want to do is, we need to sew row 1 to row 2. So you can either flip down, flip up, it doesn't matter. I'm going to flip down, and I'm not going to pin yet because I need to get those seams set. And let me put a pin in, and then I'll come over to the sewing machine because I can give you a better close-up there. Okay, so now it's glasses on, glasses off here. Okay, so what I'm doing is, let me take the pin out of the way. There, can you see here's my seam allowance for one way. Here's my seam allowance going the other way, so that they can nest beside each other, and you can feel that they'll feel nice and flat. And now I want to make sure that it's that way the whole way down. I don't want to lose sight that I'm sewing on this side. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin in. I just want to make sure that I don't feel any bump, and I don't want to feel a gap either. But I'm going to put my pin in just past my seam. That way when I stitch along and I get to this seam, I can have my needle in and it's already caught the seam before I have to take the pin out. Okay? You can put a pin in here, but you really don't have much room to, because you can't put a pin up here. It'll be in the way when you start to sew. And if you put it here, well, you're almost at this pin anyway. So I just want to make sure that this is even here. See, even. And I'm not going to worry about this end until I get near here. I mean, I wouldn't want it to be way off, but I mean to get it just a little straighter. So, pardon me for getting in your way again. Okay. Oh, lost my kettle, went under my table here. Here we go. So I'm going to just start my sewing. I want to be aware that, see how this, move in a little. See, this seam allowance wants to flip back. So I want to make sure it stays down. So as I get close to it, because I have pivot, and pivot means that when I take my foot off my foot pedal, my needle goes down and my foot comes up and I can adjust. If you don't have pivot, just reach back and just lift your foot up just a little bit. You don't have to lift it way up. Just so that you can make sure that that seam is laying flat. And then I'm just going to slowly stitch up till I'm at that seam before I take this pin up. I'll sew one-handed. My hands on it anyway. And I'm just going to stitch along until I get to the end. And let's see how we did. Oh, gotta go this way. Well, that looks pretty good. It's not perfect. See, there's a tiny, tiny space there, but that's good. Now, we've got to take care of this seam allowance. So we're going to give it a twirl. And what that means is, you see how this one's coming down, that one's going up. So what we want to do is think of it as clockwise. Sometimes it could be counterclockwise. Either way, it doesn't matter. But we're going to be coming down, over, up, and then this one is going to go this way. And it can't right now because there's stitches in the way. Let me get my seam ripper. And let's see if I can get in. Oh, pulled up my other fabric. So if you can see, you see how you have this seam coming down. So that's locking the stitches this way. So we just have to take out these few stitches here, and we have to do the same on the other side. So let's see if I can do it up in the air. So I'm just taking those stitches out. I'm not going past that line of stitching. I'm going to flip it over because there's two different seams here. There's a seam for this piece, and there's a seam for this piece. You just take those stitches out. And generally there's three of them. Okay, now when I open this up, and how were we going last time? This way. So this one is down, this one goes over, this one's up, and watch. When I push this one over, you see what happens? We get a little four patch in the middle. And if you feel that, there's no knot of or bump of fabric there. So you know sometimes how you get that little, you know, it looks like you stuck your finger back in poking it up. Now it's laying nice and flat. So let's get to our other patch. So I want to make sure I put this one back the way it's supposed to be. Okay. And now I'm going to work on this one on the bottom side, bottom right. So let me just check. Is everybody doing okay on chatting? You good? Okay. So now we're going to work on this bottom side. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to take This is column 1. This is column 2. Well, A and B, I guess I said before. Column A, column B. I'm just going to, like I'm turning a page, I'm flipping B onto A and putting a pin in. Okay? And then B onto A and putting a pin in. And remember, the pin, excuse me, the pin is going on the side that you're sewing. So if you're left-handed, you're still not going to pin over on this side. You're not sewing on this side. So whether you're right or left-handed, that pin has to go on the right side because you're sewing on that right side. Okay? So I'm going to take my 2 pieces up, switch back over to the camera, and stitch. So I'm going to pick up the first one, and I'm making sure I'm heading in the right direction, so my pin is always to the right. And just scooch it a little if it needs it. You know, I know in this case it's a square, and I would say it doesn't matter what side you sew on, but it does. Sometimes it does. So just be in the habit of just sew on the side you're supposed to, and you know, not say, oh, I'll just sew on any side. It's like anything. If you just do it the same way all the time, then you don't think about it a lot, and you'll make less mistakes. See if I can keep my hand out of your way this time. Okay, so I'm about 1 or 2 stitches from the end of that fabric. I pick up my next one. I'm just going to scooch it, so I want to make sure that this is even all the way around. And I'm going to just put it under my foot. Oh, the pedal keeps getting away from me. Okay. And we have the same thing again. We got our 2 pieces, and we're not going to cut them. So we're back at the table, and I'm going to open this up, just to make sure. Okay, we're still good. We're going in the right direction, and you can double check with your picture. So now, again, I want to press to the dark side. So I'm gonna lay the top set, so the dark is on top. So I'm pushing that dark and that seam allowance to the left, and then I'm going to flip the dark onto the light. And this way, this time I'm going to the right. So that seam allowance should be under that dark fabric. Okay, we good so far? And you notice I haven't used an iron yet, so I don't need to press. And let me check the chat. So Rose was talking about the seams on the back. So you're talking about the little twirly? The little, I call it the little whirligig, the twirly, or the swirl. You'll hear it by several names. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. As a rule, if you're just doing a 4-patch, you should have no problem, as long as you've got a dot going one way and a dot then going the other way. And if it's not dark, say you're working with 4 different fabrics, you just want one seam to go to the left and the other seam to go to the right. So if for some reason, I don't know why it would be, but for some reason, my 2 darks were on one side, my 2 lights on the other, I'm still going to press one seam to the left and one to the right. That always press to the dark side doesn't always work for me. You know, every person is different. So now we just got to sew these 2 rows together. Sorry, I keep getting my hand in your way. Sew these 2 rows together. So I'm just going to flip it down. And I'm just going to get that seam close. Put my pin in. Okay, so I know I'm sewing on this side. So see, I came from here. My pin is here because I'm sewing the top and bottom together instead of left and right. So when I take it over to my machine, I've got it going the right way. And again, I'm going to use this pin, so I'm just going to take it out for a minute. I want to make sure, yeah, that looks, so you see that seam allowance is there, that seam allowance is there. And see how I got them just nestled? And you want to make sure you feel that. Geez, my hands look dry, don't they? You want to make sure you can feel that seam the whole way down is nice and flat. My fan is on, can you see? But I know. Small things amuse me. Okay, and I've pinned a little ways away from that seam. Probably pinned a little further than I needed to. And I just want to make sure I line those up. And I know my arm's probably in your way again. So if you see me do, sometimes I'll do this. And all that is getting that thread underneath out of the way. Because sometimes it just gets in a spot where it doesn't want to let your fabric go back. So I just like I clear the deck there and get that thread out of my way. Okay, so we're ready to stitch again. And we're going to make sure we keep an eye on this so it doesn't flip up on us. And I'm way to the left of my machine, so I'm leaning over and next to the camera. Takes me a minute. So I'm going to stop, make sure that seam allowance isn't flopping towards me. I'm going to stitch slow. So I'm in that seam, and what that means for me is my needle's in that seam where the seam allowance is. So if I have to tug or adjust this in any way, I'm not pulling my one seam allowance away from the other seam allowance. If that makes sense to you. I always think of my needle as my third hand. Okay, let's see how this one is. Oh, I did better this time. How's that? Okay, so now, again, here's that seam going across. And of course, I thought I closed up. I was going to say, of course, I closed up my seam ripper. I'm going to go in and get rid of those stitches. And again, there's 2 or 3, depending on your stitch length. So I can open this up. And remember, I'm going to twirl around. So I'm going to twirl. This one goes up. This one goes over. This one comes down. So this one goes to the left. And there's that little 4 patch. And this is nice and flat with no little bump there. So now I want to make sure, I don't want to put this down the wrong way. Because, see, I don't have my line going, so I need to make sure I turn that. So check in your book. So if you're doing a different block, check whatever block you're doing, see how it's going. Okay, so I just want to double check. Sorry, I put my tools away. So now we got a 4 patch again. So we got a 4 patch in a 4 patch. So we're going to do the same thing. We have column A, column B. We're going to flip it just like we're reading a book, flip B onto A. I'm not perfectly lined up, but that's okay. I'll do that at the sewing machine. And then row 2, B onto A. And just stick that in so I know what direction I'm going in. And we're going to sew these just the same way we did that little 4-patch, where they're going to be together. So I'm going to have them right here next to my machine. So I'm going to bring it up. Needle pins on the right. Now I'm going to just make sure everybody's lined up. I need to be aware that back here I have a seam that when the feed dogs go by, it's going to want to push it down. Okay? So I'm going to get it all lined up. And I want to make sure that my needle is just at the edge of the fabric. Are you good so far? Okay? And again, I need to be aware of that seam when I get closer to it. Now I have this seam that's coming up facing that way, but it's already under the foot, so it should be fine. Just going to sew along, take my time, and I can just peek under there and make sure that my seam is coming down. If it's not the end of the world. But you want to try your best to make sure it's flat there. A couple stitches from the end. Actually, it could probably be one more. I'm going to pick up my other one and see when I pick this one up, I know my pin's there, but I'm going to be sewing on this side. And I want to go ahead and line these up. And if you want to put a pin in it, you can. Now, this time my seam on the back is coming down. See how it's coming down? So the feed dogs aren't going to bother it. And this seam is going down, so the presser foot's not going to bother that one. So we should be in good shape. So I'm going to lower my foot manually because I just want to make sure I'm lined up on the side. And I'm going to try to get my hands out of your way again this time. And I'm hanging on to that corner. So that corner's matched up with the fabric underneath. And I'm going to hang on to it as long as I can, and then I'm just going to hang on the side. Okay, so now I've got my two pieces together. I'm going to go back to the work table. So there's my two pieces. So I can't get into too much trouble now. They're connected to each other. So I just have to open them up. I'm going to open them and not worry about my seam allowance yet until I look at everything. Okay, so everybody's where they're supposed to be. Got my angle going here, my two corners there. Now I've got to determine, this is a perfect example. I need one seam that's going to go right, the other seam's going to go left, or vice versa. And see, this is my light fabric. So because there's less seam to contend with through here, it looks like my fabric automatically is, my seam allowance is going to the right under this bigger piece. So I got to make sure the seam allowance on this one is got to go to the left under this bigger piece. So I just reach underneath, push it in the other direction. How's that? So we're almost done. Let me check and see if there's any chats I need to see. Nope, we're good. So I'm just going to wait a second to make sure you're caught up. If you're all caught up, Stop and have a drink of water. Is everybody good? All right, I gotta shut my grandson's door because I can hear him talking, so I'm sure you can too. He's, he's trying to be as quiet as he can, but you know, they get playing the game and get all excited. Anyway, okay, so our last step, excuse me, is just sewing the 2 rows together. What was it? Row 1, row 2. So I'm just going to flip it down, and I know I'm going to come up and get that, try to get that seam allowance set. Before I've moved it anywhere, I'm going to put that pin in, and I set it down, okay. Yep, that's the side I want to sew, because I'm sewing these 2 pieces together, so I'm good with my pin. So now, I want to make sure that I get, oh, I moved my chair over, now I can't reach that button. I got all kinds of problems today. Okay, so I want to make sure that those seams are lined up, so I'm going to take my pin out for a minute. And again, this seam is going right, that seam's going left. Doesn't matter which way, as long as they're both going opposite each other. And I want to feel going down this whole block to make sure the whole thing is all set. So let me put that, oh, and I got to make sure that my back and front are even. I had my front a little bit above the back. So I got my pin here. I'm not going to worry about this end down here until I get past here. So I want to make sure I've lined these edges up. Okay, this seam is fine, it's going down. This seam here is way at the beginning, we shouldn't have any issues. So we should have smooth sailing. We just got to be careful here. That's that seam that we have to make sure is lined up with the front seam. So just be careful. And pardon me when I get in your way again. I'm going to take my time, make sure again that my top fabric and my bottom fabric are even with each other going this way. And I can feel, I'm double checking where my 2 seams meet, I can feel they're nested together. Okay, I just went over that seam, so I can take that pin out. Now I want to make sure that I'm lining up these 2, so this one underneath and the one on top are lined up together. We should be aligned across here, and we're aligned across here. And I'm just going to keep my finger, I usually use this one, but then you can't see anything. So I just wanted to make sure that my 2 pieces are lined up, and I'm just going to hold on to them. And as I get up closer, I'm just going to move my fingers out of the way, but I'm still hanging on. So let's see how we did this time. Oh, well, that looks pretty good. And now we just got to contend with this seam. So let's see if we can see it better at the table. So we've got a lot of seams here, and it really isn't going to matter if I have this seam go to the left or the right, because there's equal seams, other seam allowances to run into. So I generally let it go whatever way it wants to. Mine wants to go to the left. Or I guess that's to the bottom. So I would take this now to the ironing board, and I would just press, and then I would turn it over and then press. If you start ironing on this back with all these seam allowances going in different directions, all you're going to do is flip seam allowances in the wrong way, and you'll have a mess. And you don't want to iron and get this little block out of shape. So I would just press, and then come back to the front and press one more time. And there's our block for today. Lost my other one. Oh, there it is. So here's our block so far. Oh, but let me do this. Move that out. There we go. Oh, I'll do it this way. How's that? So there's our two blocks. This was last week's block, so if you're just watching for the first time, we did this block last week. Let me check the chat. Christine's all done. Yay, Christine. Okay, so let me pull this paper down again and try to do a better job than I did last time, knocking it over. Okay, so we did this block last week. Today we did this one. Next week we're going to do the card trick. So that's 4 colors of fabric. Or you know what? Let me bring it over to the other camera, because that seems to be a good close-up. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. How's that? Okay. So we did this one last week. So if you're just joining in, it'll say Gemini block 1. And then this is tonight's. This is next week. This will be the week after. Now this is a ribbon. So if you wanted to do it all one color, that's fine. If you want part of it be darker, you know how ribbon turns, or however you want to do it. So we'll be doing this one next week, which will be a little harder, and then we'll have an easy one the week after. And then we'll start down here after that. So does anybody have any last minute questions? Let me switch back here. Oh, thanks, Rhonda. It did come out pretty good. Are you talking about yours or mine? I'm pleased with mine, all things considered. And if your block's not perfect, it's not the end of the world. As people will tell you, I'll say it's not your prom dress. So you're all set there. So we'll be back together next week, Thursday. What's today? Is today the 1st? This October 1st, so October 8th it'll be. So we're back together a week from today, Thursday, at 7 o'clock, hopefully without any problems. Thank you all for hanging out while we had technical difficulties and coming back again. I know it's a pain. I have a couple of videos done doing this block, so that in one video it's just cutting it, in the other video it's just sewing it. So if you want to refer back without going through the whole sew along, I'm going to try to do that with the different blocks, so that when you come back and you want to refresh on something, it's a little quicker sewing. I try not to go in as much details, but sometimes I can't help myself. So thank you again, everyone, for joining in. Lynn's finished too. Good for you, Lynn. Good going. So it's starting to look like Christmas, isn't it? It's pretty, I love Christmas stuff. So make sure that you put your dies away where they belong. I left mine here for now, but make sure you put them away. Shut your machine off. Your plates are all ready to go for when you're cutting again. And just remember, turn them and flip them and all that, and they'll last a lot longer. So again, thank you everyone for joining in. I'm going to wait a few seconds before I stop the stream because it's delayed, and I feel like sometimes I might be cutting you off before we get to the end. So there'll be a little pause there, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.